Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Anne, but I also go by my nickname Mimi. I like to focus on Midwest true crime because I'm a Minnesota farmer's daughter. Today we're going to go to Iowa and talk about a woman who was found murdered in her hotel room. Lee Rotatori's case was unsolved for 40 years until DNA confirmed who killed her. What's interesting about this case is that her murderer was murdered just weeks after he killed Lee. Lee Rotatori was born on September 29, 1949 in Fargo, North Dakota. She was the oldest of 4 children. The family moved to Minnesota and Lee grew up just outside of Rochester. After high school, she went to the University of Wisconsin and got a bachelor's degree in dietary services and then a master's degree in food nutrition. She began working in food services for hospitals. Lee was a very well-liked woman. Police later said they didn't talk to one person who didn't like her. She was described as a farm girl at heart. Co-workers said she was intelligent, articulate, and enthusiastic. On November 14, 1970, she married Anthony Rotatori. They moved to Illinois and had 1 son, but divorced in 1977. Lee kept her last name from her first marriage due to work and because she wanted to have the same last name as her son. She then married Jerry Nemke on August 15, 1978 in Madison, Wisconsin. When Lee started working for a hospital in Michigan in October 1980, she and Jerry moved into a mobile home in Unica, Michigan. Jerry worked at a gas station and as a floral delivery man. Lee loved horses and owned a horse that she had moved to a stable nearby on the farm of Bob and Clark Fisher. They said Lee also had a dog, turkeys, and pigs on their farm, and she had part of their garden she could work in. Lee and Jerry got divorced after about a year of marriage, but they reconnected and got married for a second time on December 30th, 1981. In 1982, when Lee was 32, she was offered a job as the food service director for Jenny Edmondson Hospital in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Lee was very dedicated to her work, and this was an opportunity to advance in her career, so she happily accepted the job. On Monday, June 21st, 1982, Lee went to Council Bluffs to begin training for the new job. Council Bluffs is basically a suburb of Omaha. It's right on the Iowa-Nebraska border. Jerry stayed behind in Michigan and was going to move their mobile home to Council Bluffs once Lee got settled. Her son, who was now 11, was also going to move there at a later date. Lee checked into the Best Western Frontier Motor Lodge at 2216 27th Avenue and settled into room 106. On Thursday, June 24th, some employees of the hospital Lee had befriended invited her to go boating on Lake Manawa. They spent a few hours on the lake and then all left at dusk. Lee stopped at a McDonald's on her way back to the motel. On June 25th, 1982, Lee's boss called the hotel because she hadn't shown up for work. A little after noon, a motel employee went to check on her and found her lying on the bed in a pool of blood. She was in her pajamas. There was no sign of forced entry or a struggle. An autopsy determined Lee had been stabbed once in her heart. She had also been essayed. The medical examiner thinks she had been dead for about 12 hours prior to being found, so that would have put her death around midnight. Her food from McDonald's had been eaten, and she was in pajamas, so it does seem like the killer came to her hotel room late at night. Council Bluffs police began investigating her murder, and since she was from Michigan, Michigan State Police also got involved. The Best Western was close to Interstates 29 and 80. A lot of travelers stayed at this motel. Police said Lee's killer could be a local who was 5 feet away or someone passing through who was now 1,000 miles away. The food she bought at McDonald's was just enough for one person, so it doesn't seem like she was with anybody after she left the lake that night. Some reports say Lee's purse and some jewelry was stolen, but that's not confirmed. Police did say they didn't think the motive was robbery because the room wasn't torn apart as if somebody was looking for valuable items. We all know that spouses and significant others are usually looked at as a suspect. That was no different in this case, but Jerry Nemke caught police's attention even more than normal. He had a violent criminal past. In April 1960, when Jerry was 17, he was sent to a juvenile offender camp after being convicted of car theft. On April 29th, he escaped from that camp and went to Chicago and met 16-year-old Marilyn Duncan. He took her out on a date, and when she refused his sexual advances, he beat her with his fists. He then SA'd her and beat her with a brick. He stole $4 from her purse and then fled. She was found unconscious behind a factory. She never regained consciousness and passed away in the hospital on May 1st. Jerry was the last person to have been seen with her, which was around 9 p.m. the night she was attacked. It sounds like there was also some evidence that linked him to the crime too. Police pulled him over and arrested him for her murder when he was in another stolen car. He confessed and pled guilty, but then changed his plea to not guilty. It went to trial and he was convicted of her murder, but just 2 years later, the Illinois Supreme Court overturned the conviction, saying his preliminary hearing wasn't conducted properly. Jerry was tried again and again found guilty of Marilyn's murder and sentenced to 75 years in prison. For some reason, he was released in 1978 on parole. That is when he met and married Lee Rotatori. Police also questioned Jerry for the Starved Rock murders, which occurred in March of 1960. 3 women from Chicago were found murdered in Starved Rock Park. Chester Weger was convicted of that crime, though some doubt he truly is guilty. The Starved Rock murders is a case I am going to cover sometime. Regarding Lee's murder, police did rule out Jerry pretty quickly because he had a rock-solid alibi. I couldn't find what specifically that alibi was, though. Lee's body was cremated in Omaha and then sent to Rochester, Minnesota, where she was interred. Jenny Edmondson Hospital and another hospital Lee used to work at established a reward fund. Best Western later contributed money to that reward fund too, but nobody ever came forward with info. With basically no suspects, Lee's case went cold. Thank goodness, though, they did keep some DNA found from the crime scene. In 2001, with the advances in DNA technology, investigators sent the DNA to the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigations lab. They were able to create a DNA profile that told them the killer was a white male, but when they ran the DNA through criminal databases, no match was made. In 2018, when the Golden State Killer was identified using genealogy DNA, investigators on Lee's case were like, maybe that'll work for us. They submitted the DNA profile to Parabon Nanolabs in 2019. They also got help from an Elizabethtown College student, Eric Schubert, who is now a nationally acclaimed genealogist. They were able to narrow the DNA to a family tree and then further narrow it down to 2 brothers. They eliminated one of the brothers because he would have been too young in 1982. That left them with 1 suspect. They reached out to the suspect's daughter and asked her to submit her DNA, and she agreed to. This DNA confirmed that Lee's killer was a man named Thomas Freeman. He had been 35 years old in 1982. Investigators announced this publicly in February of 2022. The reason police couldn't get a direct DNA sample from Thomas to test was because he was dead. He was murdered just weeks after he murdered Lee. On October 30th, 1982, his decomposing body was found in a shallow grave near Cobden, Illinois. He had been shot multiple times, and the coroner believed he'd been killed sometime in July of 1982. An investigator in Lee's case said it was disappointing to finally have found the murderer, but not be able to get any answers as to why he did what he did.
We always knew the when, the where, the how of this case. It wasn't until recently that we found out the who, but now because he's dead, we'll never know the why.
The big question in this case is, are the 2 murders related? Thomas worked as a trucker, so it is possible that he was just passing through Council Bluffs, but you do have to wonder if there's a connection to Jerry Nemke. Jerry and Thomas both grew up in Illinois. Jerry went to college for a brief time in Carbondale, which is just 15 miles from where Thomas's body was found. Some reports said for sure they were acquaintances, but I couldn't find anything to confirm that. And just because they were in a close area to each other doesn't necessarily mean they knew each other, but you do have to wonder. If Thomas knew Jerry, maybe Lee knew Thomas. Police said there were no signs of forced entry in the hotel room. So if he showed up there, maybe she recognized him and let him in. You just wonder, for whatever reason, did Jerry have Thomas kill Lee and then he killed Thomas so he wouldn't rat him out? Or did Thomas kill Lee to get back at Jerry for something and then Jerry killed Thomas to get back for killing his wife? Police did say that Jerry had a rock-solid alibi for when Lee was murdered. And if you're going to hire or get somebody to kill your wife, you are going to make sure you have a rock-solid alibi so that you are not considered a suspect. What's so frustrating is that we'll probably never know the answers. Jerry passed away from natural causes in March of 2019, 3 years before police knew that Thomas Freeman was Lee's murderer. Jerry is still considered a person of interest in Thomas Freeman's murder. his murder is still unsolved. I find cold cases so interesting where years later DNA finally solves the case. It's so unfortunate for Lee's case that her killer couldn't be punished for murdering her. At least not punished in a court of law. That's all I have for this case. I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.